It was neither simple nor very amusing. I looked around and saw in a corner an ordinary dry battery. Here is something we could do, the electrolysis of water. It was an experiment with a guaranteed result, which I had already executed several times at home. Enrico would not be disappointed. I put some water in a beaker, dissolved a pinch of salt in it, turned two empty jam jars upside down in the beaker, then found two rubber-coated copper wires, attached them to the battery's poles, and fitted the wire ends into the jam jars. A minuscule procession of air bubbles rose from the wire ends. Indeed, observing them closely, you could see that from the cathode about twice as much gas was being liberated as from the anode. I wrote the well-known equation on the blackboard and explained to Enrico that what was written there was actually taking place. Enrico didn't seem too convinced, but by now it was dark, and we were half frozen. We washed our hands, bought some slices of chestnut pudding, and went home, leaving the electrolysis to continue on its own. The next day we still had access, in pliant obsequences to theory. The cathode jar was almost full of gas. The anode jar was half full. I brought this to Enrico's attention, giving myself as much importance as I could, and trying to awaken the suspicion that I won't say electrolysis, but its application as the confirmation of the law of definite proportions was my invention, the fruit of patient experiments conducted secretly in my room. But Enrico was in a bad mood and doubted everything. Who says that it's actually hydrogen and oxygen? He said to me rudely. And what if there's chlorine? Didn't you put in salt? The objection struck me as insulting. How did Enrico dare to doubt my statement? Only I, the theoretician. He, although the proprietor of the lab to a certain degree, and then only at second hand, indeed precisely because he was in a position to boast of other qualities, should have abstained from criticisms for sure. Now we shall see, I said. I carefully lifted the cathode jar and, holding it with its open end down, lit a match and brought it close. There was an explosion, small but sharp and angry. The jar burst into splinter. Luckily, I was holding it level with my chest and not higher, and there remained in my hand as a sarcastic symbol the glass ring of the bottom. We left, discussing what had occurred. My legs were shaking a bit. I experienced retrospective fear and at the same time a kind of foolish pride at having confirmed a hypothesis and having unleashed a force of nature. It was indeed hydrogen, therefore the same element that burns in the sun and stars, and from whose condensation the universes are formed in eternal silence.